Liam Pierce stood in the grand, high-ceilinged hall, feeling small and out of place. The walls were adorned with intricate alien artwork, vibrant colors that seemed to shimmer and pulse with a life of their own. The air was cool but thick with tension, a feeling he had become familiar with in the high-stakes world of diplomacy. This was no ordinary mission. This wasn't just about securing peace between Earth and the Torlock Empire. This was a test, one that could determine the future of humankind's survival in a galaxy full of advanced, sometimes hostile species. The Torlock Empire, an ancient civilization known for its incredible technological advancements and their warrior-like society, had been hesitant about making peace with Earth. Despite their outward superiority, the Torlocks had seen humans as unpredictable, even dangerous, and there were factions within the Empire that wanted to keep humanity at arm's length, if not outright isolate them. That was why Liam was here, a former military strategist turned diplomat. Liam's job was to navigate the delicate balance of power between his people and the Torlocks. As he stood waiting, scanning the room for any sign of movement, he tried to steady his nerves. The room around him was bustling, with members of various alien races all speaking in hushed tones. Liam was accustomed to different species, but there was something intimidating about the Torlocks. Their sheer physicality, tall, imposing, and warrior-like, was enough to make anyone feel inferior. And yet, in that very moment, it wasn't their intimidating appearance that made Liam's heart race. It was the presence of one individual, one who seemed to command the room without uttering a single word. Princess Solara. She entered the hall with an air of grace and authority that immediately caught Liam's attention. Her skin shimmered like polished marble, glowing softly with an ethereal hue. Her dark, flowing hair cascaded down her back in perfect waves, and her eyes, those deep, violet eyes, seemed to pierce through him with a quiet, intense power. She was nothing short of mesmerizing. Every step she took radiated a quiet confidence, as though the very ground beneath her feet recognized the weight of her presence. Liam's breath caught in his throat. He had seen the reports, read the descriptions, but nothing had prepared him for the real thing. The way she held herself, the way she moved, everything about her seemed almost otherworldly. It wasn't just her beauty that struck him. It was the strength behind her gaze, the sense of responsibility that seemed to settle over her like a heavy mantle. As the meeting began, Liam could hardly focus on the negotiations. His mind kept drifting back to her, to the way she sat at the head of the table, poised and calm, her gaze scanning the room with sharp intelligence. He forced himself to pay attention to the discussions, to the critical points that needed to be addressed for the peace talks to succeed. But every time his eyes met hers, his thoughts scattered and his pulse quickened. And then it happened. Liam didn't mean to say it. The words slipped out before he could stop them. "You're so beautiful, you take my breath away," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. The moment the words left his lips, he felt the heat rise in his cheeks. He hadn't meant to speak like that, certainly not in such an important formal setting. But as soon as he said it, he regretted it. Princess Solara's eyes widened for just a fraction of a second, her lips parting slightly as if she hadn't expected the compliment. For a brief moment, she seemed flustered. Her composure faltered, and her usually unshakable demeanor seemed to soften. Then, just as quickly, she regained her control, her expression smoothing over into a mask of royal indifference. But Liam could have sworn he saw the faintest blush on her cheeks. The silence in the room felt like an eternity. Everyone had heard what he'd said, and for a moment, Liam thought he had made an irreparable mistake. But when Solara spoke, her voice was soft and measured, though there was an unmistakable warmth in her words. "Thank you, Earth Ambassador," she said, her tone gentle but commanding. "But such words are rarely heard from those who meet me." Liam felt his stomach twist. Was she mocking him? Or was she genuinely surprised by his honesty? He couldn't tell. The room seemed to close in on him, and the weight of every alien gaze felt suffocating. But just as quickly as the awkwardness had settled in, it passed. The conversation moved forward, and Liam tried to focus on the discussions, though his mind remained a whirlwind of thoughts about that fleeting moment. After the meeting ended, Liam couldn't shake the image of Solara's blush from his mind. He had always been a man of words, using his ability to speak to charm and influence, but this was different. There was something about the princess, something about the way she reacted to his words, that left him questioning everything he thought he knew about diplomacy. Later that evening, as Liam walked through the grand halls of the Torlock Palace, he found himself wondering how he could ever approach Solara again. Could he speak to her again? Would she even remember the moment they shared? Or would she dismiss him as just another earthling with fanciful words? As he passed through an open balcony, the cool night air brushing against his face, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned, half expecting to see one of the other diplomats or soldiers, but instead, it was her, Princess Solara. She stood a few feet away, her face unreadable, though her eyes held a depth that made him feel like she was studying him in a way no one else had. "I didn't expect that," she said quietly, her voice steady, though there was something almost vulnerable about her tone. Liam didn't know how to respond.
"I apologize if my words were out of place. I didn't mean to offend you," he said quickly, his voice full of regret.
But to his surprise, Solara smiled, though it was small and fleeting.
"You didn't offend me," she said, taking a small step closer.
"I simply didn't expect such honesty." Liam looked at her, feeling both embarrassed and somehow relieved. "I meant it," he said softly. "You truly are breathtaking, in a way that I couldn't put into words before. But when I saw you—" His voice trailed off as he searched for the right words, but all he could find was the truth. It just slipped out. She regarded him for a long moment, and in that silence, Liam felt a strange sense of connection. The world outside seemed to fade as the two of them stood there, alone on the balcony. "Most people see me only for what I represent," Solara said after a long pause. "They see the crown, the power, but they never see the person beneath it, the one who is lost in all of this." Liam was taken aback. He hadn't expected her to open up like this. In the brief time they had shared, he had begun to realize that there was more to her than the political persona she projected. There was depth, vulnerability, things that no one else seemed to notice. "I see you," he said, his voice firm. "Not as a princess or a symbol. Just you." Solara looked at him, her violet eyes searching his face for sincerity. After what felt like an eternity, she nodded slowly. "Then, perhaps, Earth Ambassador, we can begin again?" And just like that, a new chapter in their uneasy alliance began. One not founded on politics or war, but on something deeper. Something neither of them had expected. Liam walked down the long, polished halls of the Torlock Palace, his mind racing.
What had just happened? That conversation with Solara on the balcony had left him both exhilarated and uncertain.
He had never expected to be in this position, finding himself not only in the midst of a tense peace summit, but also developing a connection with an alien princess. He had met many influential figures in his career, but none had affected him the way Solara did. She wasn't like the others he had met. Yes, she was the princess of the Torlock Empire, an heir to a powerful throne. But there was something different about her. It wasn't just her beauty, though it was undeniable. It wasn't just her intelligence, though she had that in abundance. There was something deeper, something raw, beneath the polished exterior that made Liam feel a sense of curiosity and longing to know her better. As he walked through the palace, he found himself looking over his shoulder, almost expecting to see her again. His thoughts returned to their brief conversation, the way she had looked at him with those violet eyes, the way her words had held a quiet vulnerability. It wasn't like anything he had experienced before. Most of the people he dealt with in the diplomatic world were focused on power, influence, and their personal agendas. But with Solara, he felt as though there was a possibility of something more, something real. Liam knew that the peace talks were still in their early stages, and there was much work to be done. He couldn't afford to get distracted by his growing feelings for Solara, not when so much was at stake. Earth needed this alliance with the Torlock Empire. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and the human race was still finding its way in it. But there was a part of Liam that couldn't help but be drawn to her. Her strength, her grace, her vulnerability. He arrived at the dining hall, where the evening meal was about to begin. The table was long and adorned with exotic foods from across the galaxy. As the ambassadors and leaders of various races began to take their seats, Liam spotted her immediately. Solara sat at the head of the table, her back straight and her posture regal, as always. But this time, there was a subtle difference. There was a quietness to her that he hadn't seen before. Her eyes scanned the room, but there was a distant look in them, as though her mind was far away.
Liam took his seat across from her, trying not to let his nervousness show.
It was a diplomat, not some star-struck admirer. He had a job to do, and the fate of both Earth and the Torlock Empire rested on his ability to navigate these complex negotiations. But as he sat there, his thoughts kept returning to Solara, to the moment on the balcony when she had spoken so openly with him. He couldn't help but feel that there was more to her than the image she projected to the world. As the meal began, Liam found himself glancing over at her every now and then. She was still as composed as ever, but there was something different about her tonight. Maybe it was the way she was holding herself, or maybe it was just that feeling he had, a feeling that they had shared something on a deeper level, something beyond the surface. He couldn't explain it, but he was drawn to her in a way that he couldn't ignore. Throughout the meal, the conversation was formal, as it usually was at these gatherings. Diplomats and officials from various planets discussed trade routes, military alliances, and scientific advancements. But all the while, Liam's mind was elsewhere. He found himself stealing glances at Solara, noticing the way she spoke with the others, the way her voice was calm and authoritative, yet soft and measured. It was clear that she was a woman who commanded respect, but there was something more beneath that, a kindness, an empathy that she rarely showed to others. After the meal, the guests began to disperse, and Liam found himself alone in the palace gardens. The cool night air was a welcome relief from the warmth of the dining hall. He needed a moment to clear his head, to focus on the task at hand. But as he walked through the gardens, the scent of alien flowers filling the air, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning around, Liam was surprised to find Solara standing there. She looked different in the moonlight, softer, almost ethereal. The glow of her skin seemed to shine brighter, and her eyes, those violet eyes, held an unreadable expression. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood there, watching each other in the quiet night. "I didn't expect you to be out here," Liam said, breaking the silence. "Shouldn't you be resting? The peace talks are still ongoing." Solara smiled faintly, but it wasn't the confident smile he had seen before. It was something more sincere, more open. "I needed some time to think," she replied softly. "These talks, they are important, but they come with a heavy weight. It's not just about politics or military power or trade. It's about the future of my people. And that is a burden I carry every day." Liam nodded, understanding more than she realized. He, too, carried the weight of responsibility. But unlike Solara, who seemed to embrace her role with grace and strength, he sometimes felt overwhelmed by the expectations placed on him. "I understand," he said quietly. "It's a lot to bear, especially when your people look to you for answers." Solara looked at him for a moment, her eyes searching his face. "Do you ever wonder, Liam, if we're more than the roles we are given? If, deep down, we're just people?" Liam's heart skipped a beat at her question. There was a vulnerability in her voice that he hadn't expected. He took a step closer, his gaze steady. "I think we're all more than what others expect of us," he said. We're human, we're flawed, and we all have our own hopes and fears. We can't always live up to what the world wants from us. Her gaze softened, and for a moment, Liam saw a flicker of something deeper in her eyes. I think you understand me better than most, she said softly. I've spent my life surrounded by expectations, by people who want me to be a perfect leader, a perfect princess. But I'm not perfect. I'm just trying to find my way, like everyone else. Liam reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before he gently touched her arm. You're doing just fine, he said, with a reassuring smile. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be true to yourself. For a moment, there was silence between them. The world around them seemed to fade away as they stood there, connected by something unspoken. The distance between them had closed, and there was an understanding between them that went beyond words. I don't know why I'm telling you all of this, Solara said after a while, her voice barely above a whisper. It's not something I share with anyone, Liam smiled softly. You don't have to explain. I'm glad you trust me. She met his gaze, and for the first time she didn't look away. There was a warmth in her eyes that made his heart race. I think, she said slowly, that you may be the first person who has ever seen me as just me. Not as a princess, not as a political figure, just Solara. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. There was a weight to her words, and in that moment, he felt the depth of her vulnerability. It was something he had never expected from someone like her, someone so strong, so powerful. But it was real, and it was beautiful.
Solara,
he said softly, his voice filled with sincerity.
I see you. I see you for who you are.
And I think that's what makes you so remarkable. You're not just a princess. You're someone with strength, with kindness, and with a heart that's capable of amazing things. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. And then, without a word, she took a step forward, closing the gap between them. Her gaze never left his, and Liam felt his breath catch in his throat. For a moment, it felt as though the world had stopped. There was only the two of them, standing in the garden beneath the stars, connected by something neither of them could name. Thank you, Solara whispered, her voice barely audible. Thank you for seeing me. And in that quiet moment, Liam realized that, for the first time in his life, he wasn't just a diplomat. He was a man who had found something more than just an alliance. He had found someone he could understand, someone who could see him for who he truly was. The days following the garden conversation were filled with a heightened sense of anticipation. Liam couldn't help but find his thoughts constantly returning to Solara, to her vulnerability, to the quiet bond they had started to form. Their brief moments of connection in the palace had left a mark on him, something he couldn't easily ignore. There was a quiet understanding between them now, a shared space where the weight of their roles, diplomat, princess, seemed to fall away. In those moments, it was just two people talking, truly listening to each other, something rare in the diplomatic world he inhabited. But reality, as it always did, began to pull him back. The peace talks were far from over, and the stakes were incredibly high. Earth's survival depended on the success of these negotiations. It was one of the reasons why Liam had been sent here in the first place. His sharp mind, his ability to read people, to understand them. He was good at his job, but this connection with Solara was something he hadn't expected, and it threatened to cloud his judgment. The following morning, after another full day of talks, Liam found himself once again walking through the lush, sprawling gardens of the palace. It had become his routine. There was something calming about the quiet here, away from the formal discussions, away from the pressure of securing an alliance that could change the course of human history. He had taken to walking here, trying to clear his mind, to think. He had barely stepped into the garden when he heard footsteps behind him, light but purposeful. He turned, expecting it to be a member of the Torlock delegation, or perhaps one of the palace attendants, but instead, it was Solara. She stood a few paces away, looking every bit the poised princess she was, yet there was something different in her expression, a softness that hadn't been there before. "Liam," she said, her voice calm but holding an undercurrent of something he couldn't quite place, "I hope I'm not interrupting your thoughts." He smiled, stepping closer to her. "Not at all," he replied. "I could use a bit of company." She nodded, her eyes meeting his in a way that made Liam's chest tighten slightly. There was a new level of openness between them now, one that wasn't born out of diplomacy but something more personal. He could feel it in the air, thick with unspoken words and shared moments. The sun had begun to set, casting a warm golden glow across the garden. The light caught her features, making her look even more striking than usual. Her beauty was undeniable, but it wasn't the only thing that drew Liam in. It was the way she carried herself, the quiet strength in her posture, the wisdom that seemed to radiate from her. "I've been thinking a lot," Solara said, her voice low and thoughtful, "about what you said the other night, about being true to ourselves." She paused, her gaze moving to the horizon, as if seeking the right words. "I've spent so much of my life trying to meet everyone else's expectations. As a princess, as a leader. But when I'm alone, I wonder who I am without all of that." Liam watched her closely, his heart aching for her. "You're more than your title, Solara," he said quietly. "You don't have to live up to anyone's expectations but your own." Her eyes flicked to his, and for a moment he thought he saw something flicker in her gaze. Uncertainty, maybe. Or fear. She looked away quickly, her expression softening. "I know," she said softly. "But it's hard to escape it, isn't it? The weight of being something more than human, almost." Liam took a step closer, drawn to the sincerity in her words. "I think we all carry weights," he said, "whether it's the weight of a title, of family, or the expectations of others. But in the end, we have to find a way to carry it without letting it crush us." She looked at him again, her gaze steady.
You make it sound so simple. It's not, Liam admitted, but it's worth trying. They fell into a comfortable silence, standing side by side in the fading light.
The world seemed to slow down around them, the only sound the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. It was a moment of peace, something neither of them had been able to experience in a long time.
"I don't think I've ever met anyone like you," Solara said quietly, breaking the silence. "You're different from all the others."
You don't look at me like I'm just a princess. You see me.
Liam felt his heart skip a beat at her words. "And I don't just see the crown you wear," he said softly. "I see the person behind it." Her eyes softened, and for a brief moment, she looked vulnerable, something she didn't often show. "I don't know what to do with that," she confessed. "With you! I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something, but I don't know what it is." Liam's breath caught in his throat. He knew exactly what she meant. They were standing on the edge of something that neither of them could define, but something that felt real. His feelings for her were growing stronger with each passing day, and he couldn't deny it any longer. He didn't want to. But at the same time, the reality of their situation pressed down on him. The peace talks, the alliance, the future of Earth. He couldn't afford to let his emotions cloud his judgment. And yet, he couldn't stop the pull he felt toward her. "I'm not sure what this is either," he said quietly. "But I know that when I'm with you, I feel like I'm seeing the world for the first time. Not through the lens of duty, or politics, or war, but as it really is. And for the first time, I feel like I'm actually living, not just existing." Solara turned to face him fully now, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that took his breath away. "Do you think it's possible for people like us to ever be free of our roles? To be just ourselves?" Liam thought about her question for a long moment. The world they both inhabited was filled with expectations, with a weight of responsibilities that neither of them had chosen. He had never imagined himself falling into this kind of situation, becoming emotionally entangled with a royal princess while negotiating a peace deal. It was a delicate balance, but as he looked at her, something deep within him told him that it was worth it. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice low, "but I think we have to try. We have to try to find who we are beyond everything else." Solara studied him for a moment as though weighing his words. Finally, she nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Maybe you're right." They stood there for a while longer, the sky above them darkening as the stars began to appear. It felt like time had slowed down in that moment, as if nothing else in the universe mattered but the quiet understanding between them. But as the evening wore on, the reality of their situation began to creep back into Liam's mind. The peace talks were still ongoing. The factions within the Torlock Empire that opposed the Alliance were still a threat. He couldn't afford to lose focus. He couldn't afford to let his growing feelings for Solara interfere with his mission. He turned to her, his expression serious. "We have to finish what we started," he said. "Our people are counting on us." Solara's smile faded slightly, but there was no disappointment in her eyes, only understanding. "I know," she said softly. "We'll do what we must. But that doesn't mean we can't find moments like this. Moments where we're just us." Liam nodded, his heart heavy but hopeful. They couldn't ignore their responsibilities, but maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to balance their duties with the moments that made them feel alive. And as the night wrapped around them like a blanket, Liam realized that whatever happened next, whatever the future held, he would never forget this moment. Standing in the garden, side by side with Solara, they had shared something real, and that, he knew, was something worth holding on to. The days seemed to blur together as the peace talks continued. Each meeting was filled with heated debates, formal speeches, and careful negotiations. Liam did his best to focus on the task at hand. The alliance between Earth and the Torlock Empire was vital for the future of his people. But despite his best efforts, his thoughts kept drifting back to Solara. The moments they had shared, the connection that had been building between them, weighed heavily on his mind. Every time they crossed paths, there was a spark, an unspoken understanding that neither of them had fully acknowledged, but both knew was there. The chemistry between them was undeniable, and yet, neither of them could allow themselves to fully give in to it. The stakes were too high. The future of humanity, the peace between their worlds, depended on the success of these talks. It was on the 4th day of the summit that the situation took a turn. A message came through the communication system that the peace talks were at risk. A rogue faction within the Torlock Empire, led by a group of military leaders opposed to any alliance with Earth, had launched an attack on a border colony. The attack had been swift and brutal, and the situation was spiraling out of control. Liam's heart sank as the news filtered through the palace. The peaceful future he had been working toward suddenly seemed out of reach. Without hesitation, he went to Solara. They couldn't afford to waste time. The threat was real, and it was clear that the peace talks, already fragile, could collapse completely if they didn't act quickly. He found her in the war room, her face a mask of determination. The princess had always been calm under pressure, but Liam could see the toll this was taking on her. This was her people's future, their survival, and she had always been expected to lead them through these kinds of challenges. Now, though, it felt different. It was more than just a political or military struggle. It was personal.
"Liam!" Solara greeted him, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "The situation is worse than we anticipated."
The rogue faction is spreading through the border territories, and if we don't act quickly, we risk losing everything we've worked for. Liam stepped closer, his eyes meeting hers. "What can we do?" "How can we stop this?" Solara's gaze shifted to the holographic map of the Empire, her mind clearly racing through the options. We can send forces to defend the colonies, but the real danger is the military leaders behind this uprising. They're trying to disrupt the peace process, and if we don't stop them, they'll convince more of the Empire to rise against the peace talks. Liam took a deep breath, his mind whirring. We need to find a way to neutralize the threat without further escalating the conflict. We can't afford to make this war any bigger. Solara nodded.
I agree, but the challenge is this faction is well-funded and has significant support from key military figures.
They won't back down easily. Liam looked at the princess, seeing the weariness in her eyes.
The pressure of her position, the weight of the Empire's future, was evident in every line of her face. And yet she held herself with such strength, such grace. It was a quality Liam had come to admire more than he could express. "We'll figure it out," Liam said, his voice firm. "You don't have to do this alone." Solara's eyes softened, and for a brief moment he saw the woman behind the princess, the person who had spent her life carrying burdens that no one else understood. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in days, she smiled at him.
Thank you, Liam, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You've been a steady presence in all of this.
I don't know what I would have done without you. Liam felt a wave of warmth spread through him at her words. He hadn't expected her to open up like this, to show him that side of her. But in that moment, he knew that their connection went beyond politics, beyond duty. It was real, and as much as he tried to push it aside, he knew that he cared for her in a way that was far more than professional. As they worked together in the war room, strategizing their next move, Liam and Solara continued to share small moments, glances that lingered too long, the way their hands brushed when they reached for the same datapad. It was becoming harder to ignore the pull between them, but neither of them could afford to act on it. Not now. The future of their people was on the line. The next few days were a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and tense negotiations. The rogue faction's forces had been repelled, but the situation was far from over. The resistance had spread, and every time it seemed like they had a plan, another complication would arise. Solara's determination never wavered, but Liam could see the toll it was taking on her. She was pushing herself to the limit, trying to balance the demands of being a leader and the pressure of the peace talks. One evening, after a particularly long day of discussions, Solara found Liam alone in the palace gardens. He had been walking, trying to clear his mind, when she appeared beside him. Her presence was like a calming breeze, and for a moment, all the tension of the past few days seemed to melt away.
I don't know how much longer I can keep this up,
she said quietly, her voice filled with exhaustion. I feel like I'm losing myself in all of this. This war, these politics, the constant pressure. It's hard to breathe sometimes. Liam turned to her, his heart aching for her. I see it, he said softly. I see how hard you're working, how much you're carrying. But you don't have to do it alone, Solara. She met his gaze, and for a long moment they stood in silence. It was as if everything else in the universe had fallen away, leaving only the two of them standing there in the quiet garden. The connection between them was undeniable, and Liam could feel his resolve beginning to crack.
I don't know how to balance everything, Solara whispered, her voice filled with vulnerability. I want to be a good leader, but I also want to be me.
I want to be more than just the princess, more than just the symbol of power. I want to live my life, Liam. I want to experience something real. Liam's heart raced at her words. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to gently touch her arm. You deserve that, Solara. You deserve to be more than just your title. You deserve to live, to experience everything the universe has to offer. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, Liam knew that he could no longer ignore what was between them. He had tried to keep his feelings at bay, to focus on the mission, on the peace talks. But with each passing day, each shared glance, each quiet conversation, his feelings for her had grown stronger. And now, in this moment, He knew that he couldn't walk away from it. He gently cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing across her soft skin. Solara. Before he could finish, she closed the distance between them, her lips finding his in a kiss that was as soft as it was powerful. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The world faded away, and there was nothing but the two of them, standing together in the garden, sharing something real and beautiful. When they pulled away, neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. The kiss had spoken louder than words ever could. And as they stood there, in the stillness of the night, they both knew that their future was uncertain. There was still the war to end, the alliance to secure, the peace to be made. But in that moment, they had each other, and that, for now, was enough.